The heavy velvet drapes of the university auditorium were dyed a deep, institutional crimson, matching the velvet of the doctoral hood resting over my shoulders. Around me, the air was thick with the scent of cheap celebratory champagne, expensive perfumes, and the sharp, collective intake of breath from 200 freshly minted physicians realizing their lives were finally about to begin. The noise was deafening, a chaotic symphony of roaring cheers, cameras clicking in rapid, manic succession, and weeping parents clinging to their children as if they had just returned from a war zone. In a way, we had. But as I stood under the blistering glare of the stage lights, my diploma clutched tightly in my right hand, my world was entirely silent. My eyes swept over the crowded rows of the auditorium for the fourth time, tracking the letters of the alphabet taped to the sides of the wooden seats. Row L seats 14 and 15. I had paid for them 6 months in advance, sacrificing 2 weeks' worth of grocery money during my brutal internal medicine rotation to ensure my parents would have a perfect view. The seats were empty. Instead of my mother's polished pearl necklace or my father's predictably oversized blazer, there was only the vacant, scuffed faux leather of the folding chairs, staring back at me like 2 hollow eyes. A heavy hand dropped onto my shoulder, jolting me out of the trance. It was Dr. Vance, my residency director, his silver hair catching the stage light. "Incredible work, Julian, top of the class. Your folks must be tearing the roof down right now," he boomed, his voice vibrating with genuine paternal pride. He looked around, expecting a tearful family to emerge from the wings. "They're stuck in traffic, I think," I lied. The words tasted like ash. "But thank you, Dr. Vance, for everything." "Go celebrate, son. You've earned it," he smiled, patting my back before moving on to the next graduate. I walked off the stage, the heavy fabric of my gown dragging against my ankles like wet cement. In the corridor, away from the blinding lights, I pulled my phone from my pocket. There were no missed calls, no text messages, nothing but a solitary notification from Instagram, posted 45 minutes ago by my older sister, Chloe. I tapped the screen. The image bloomed in high definition, vibrant and nauseatingly cheerful. It was a photograph taken in the manicured backyard of my parents' suburban home. A massive pastel pink banner hung between 2 oak trees, reading, "Happy 1 SDBARKDAY, Princess BLLA." In the center of the frame was Chloe, holding a manicured bitch on fries wearing a tiny, custom rhinestone tiara. Flanking her were my mother and father. My mother was wearing the exact emerald silk dress she had bought for my graduation, her face lit up in a radiant, unbothered grin as she held a silver platter of artisanal dog cupcakes. My father was sporting a ridiculous party hat, laughing hysterically as he popped a bottle of Dom Perignon. The caption read, "Family is everything." We would never miss our precious angel's big day. Big thanks to Mom and Dad for canceling their plans to make Bella's bark day so magical. Paw Sparkling Sparkle's priorities blessed Dog Mom. A slow, cold numbness crept from the tips of my fingers up to my chest. Canceling their plans, they hadn't forgotten. They hadn't been delayed. They had explicitly looked at a choice between the culmination of my 8 years of grueling, agonizing medical education, the sleepless 72-hour shifts, the blood, the sweat, the debt, and a birthday party for a dog. And they had chosen the dog. I stood in the drafty concrete stairwell of the stadium, surrounded by the faint echo of distant cheers, and felt something fundamental snap inside me. The soft, yearning boy who had spent his entire life begging for a sliver of Arthur and a leaner Vance's approval simply ceased to exist. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I merely turned off my phone, took off the crimson hood, and tossed it into the industrial trash bin at the bottom of the stairs. 10 years is a long time in medicine, but it passes in a blink when you bury yourself alive in your work. By the time I reached 36, I was no longer the hollow-eyed boy in the stairwell. I was Dr. Julian Vance, Chief of Orthopedic Surgery and founder of the Vance Regenerative Institute, a cutting-edge, private multi-specialty clinic nestled in the wealthiest enclave of the city. The floors were polished white marble. The walls were adorned with minimalist, museum-quality art, and the waiting room resembled a 5-star hotel lounge, replete with a concierge and a grand piano. I had built an empire on a single, unwavering philosophy: absolute precision, absolute control, and absolute emotional detachment. My patients were files to be solved, anatomy to be corrected, and bodies to be healed. I was highly respected, fiercely feared by my residents, and completely, utterly alone by choice. My personal life was a ghost town, but my surgical records were flawless. On a Tuesday morning, 10 years to the month after my graduation, I was sitting in my glass-walled private office, reviewing an MRI scan of a complex spinal stenosis. The intercom buzzed, breaking the pristine silence of the room. "Dr. Vance," my head receptionist, Marcus, spoke, his voice unusually hesitant. "I'm sorry to disturb you, but there's a situation in the lobby." I frowned, tapping my stylus against the tablet. "Did VIP Transport misplace a patient, Marcus? You know I don't handle logistics." "No, sir, it's not that. There is an elderly couple here. They don't have an appointment and they don't have insurance that we accept. In fact, they don't have any means to pay the standard consultation fee. But they refuse to leave. They're demanding to see you specifically." I sighed, a cold knot forming in the pit of my stomach. "Did they give a name?" "They claim to be your parents, Dr. Vance, a Mr. and Mrs. Arthur Vance. They're making quite a scene, telling the other patients that you'll take care of them for free." For a long moment, the only sound in the office was the low, rhythmic hum of the air conditioning. 10 years. 10 years of absolute, unbroken silence. They hadn't called when I passed my board exams. They hadn't called when I bought my first house. They hadn't called when my name was published in the New England Journal of Medicine *. "Bring them to exam room 4, I said, my voice terrifyingly calm even to my own ears. "And Marcus, have security stand by the door." When I walked into exam room for 10 minutes later, I didn't see the formidable, looming figures of my childhood. I saw two deeply weathered, shrunken strangers sitting on the sterile examination table. My father's hair was entirely white, his posture slumped, and his breathing shallow. He was wearing an old, frayed tweed jacket that looked 3 sizes too big for him. My mother sat beside him, her hands trembling as she clutched a cheap vinyl purse. The emerald silk and polished pearls of my memory were gone, replaced by a faded cardigan and eyes that were wide with a mixture of fear and desperate hope. When the door clicked shut, my mother gasped, rising to her feet. "Julian, oh, thank God, look at you. Look at this place. You're a big doctor now, just like we always knew you'd be." She stepped forward, her arms opening for a hug. I didn't move. I stood firmly by the counter, my hands tucked deeply into the pockets of my pristine white lab coat, my chart tablet resting against my chest like a shield. "State your name and your medical complaint," I said, my voice devoid of any modulation. My mother stopped mid-stride, her arms dropping to her sides as if she had been struck. "Julian, it's us. It's your mother and father. Why are you speaking to us like that?" "I am Dr. Vance," I replied, staring directly into her eyes. "You are not on my schedule, and this clinic operates strictly by appointment. However, out of professional courtesy for the disruption in my lobby, I will give you exactly 5 minutes. What is the medical emergency?" My father let out a harsh, rattling cough, his hand flying to his chest. "Julian, please. Don't do this. We're in trouble, serious trouble." He looked at my mother, who bit her lip, tears welling in her heavily wrinkled eyes. "It's your father's spine, Julian," she whispered, her voice cracking. "He has a severe degenerative disc disease. 2 weeks ago, a doctor at the county hospital told us he needs an immediate, highly complex spinal fusion. If he doesn't get it, he'll be permanently paralyzed within 3 months. Then he should schedule the surgery at the county hospital," I said smoothly. "We can't," my mother cried out, stepping closer, her hands clasped in a begging gesture. "The wait list at the public hospital is 14 months long, and we don't have insurance anymore, Julian. Your father lost his pension and we had to mortgage the house to help Chloe with her business ventures. We're bankrupt. We have nothing left." "Ah," I muttered, a dark, cynical amusement blooming in my chest. "Chloe, how is she, and how is Princess Bella?" My parents both flinched violently at the mention of the dog. My mother looked down at the linoleum floor, her face flushing a deep, shameful crimson. My father's head sank lower into his shoulders. "Julian," my father rasped, his eyes filled with a raw, agonizing desperation. "We know we made mistakes. We know we weren't. We weren't always there for you, but we are your parents. You took an oath to heal people. You're our son. You can't just let me become a cripple when you have the power to fix me. This clinic, you own it. You can do the surgery for free. Please, we're begging you." I looked at the digital clock on the wall. 3 minutes had passed. I stepped closer to the examination table, pulling the tablet up to bring up a blank diagnostic screen. "Lie down, Arthur," I ordered coldly. My father complied eagerly, wincing in agony as he hoisted his frail legs onto the table. I snapped on a pair of nitrile gloves. The latex made a sharp, sterile asterisk pop asterisk against my wrists. I began the physical examination, my fingers tracing his spine with practiced, aggressive precision. With every palpation, my father groaned in pain. Medically, he wasn't lying. His L4, L5 vertebrae were completely collapsed, crushing the spinal cord. It was a textbook case of advanced stenosis, complicated by severe osteoporosis. It was a surgery I performed 3 times a week. I could do it in my sleep. I could give him his life back with a 2-hour procedure. I pulled off my gloves and threw them into the biohazard bin. "The diagnosis is correct. You require a L4, L5 posterior lumbar interbody fusion with instrumentation." My mother let out a sob of relief. "Oh, thank you, Julian, thank you. When can we schedule it? We can come in next week, or—" "You misunderstand me," I interrupted, my voice dropping an octave, cutting through her relief like a scalpel. "I said you require the surgery. I did not say I would perform it." The room plunged into a suffocating silence. My mother's mouth stayed open, her eyes darting between my face and my white coat, searching for a punchline that wasn't coming. "What do you mean?" My father whispered from the table, his voice trembling. "I mean that the cost of this procedure at the Vance Regenerative Institute is $85,000, exclusive of hospital stays and anesthesia fees," I said, leaning back against the counter and crossing my arms. "We require a 50% deposit prior to booking the operating room." "Julian, we don't have $85, let alone $85,000, my mother shrieked, her maternal facade completely fracturing into panic. "Are you insane? We are your family. You're going to let your own father become paralyzed over money." "Family," I echoed the word, letting it linger in the air like a foul odor. I slowly walked over to my desk area in the corner of the room, picked up my phone, and opened an old, saved file. I turned the screen toward them. It was the screenshot of Chloe's Instagram post from 10 years ago. The pink banner, the tiara, their smiling faces. "10 years ago, I stood on a stage 2 miles from here," I said, my voice deadpan, completely devoid of anger, which made it infinitely more terrifying. "I graduated at the top of my medical school class. I had 2 seats reserved for the people who brought me into this world. Those seats were empty because you were celebrating a dog's first birthday." "Julian, that was 10 years ago," my mother pleaded, reaching out to touch my arm. I stepped back, avoiding her contact as if she were infectious. "It was a mistake. Chloe was having a hard time. She threatened to hurt herself if we didn't support her." "You chose a dog over your son's life achievements," I continued, cutting her off. "For 18 years, I was the invisible child. I ate the leftovers. I wore the hand-me-downs. I studied by the light of the hallway lamp because Chloe needed the quiet in her room. I forgave all of it because I thought, asterisk, when I become a doctor, they will finally see me. They will finally be proud. But you didn't even show up." "We're sorry," my father groaned, rolling onto his side, tears finally leaking from his aged eyes. "Julian, I'm sorry. I was a fool. I let your mother guide the family. I went along with it. Please, don't let me pay for that mistake with my legs." I looked at him, and for a split second, a ghost of the boy from the Crimson Auditorium felt a pang of pity. But then I looked at my mother, whose eyes weren't filled with remorse for hurting her son. They were filled with the rage of a parent who was being denied something she felt entitled to. "You spent 10 years pretending I didn't exist," I said softly, walking toward the door. "You don't get to invoke the bond of family only when you need my scalpel. My oath requires me to treat patients. It does not require me to operate for free for people who abandon me." I opened the exam room door. 2 large mall security guards I hired for the building were standing right outside. "Dr. Vance, please," my mother screamed, her voice echoing down the pristine marble hallway of the clinic, drawing the attention of wealthy clients. "You're a monster, a cold-blooded monster. How can you live with yourself?" I paused at the threshold, looking back at them one last time. "I live very comfortably, Eleanor. Marcus will show you the exit. If you return to this property without $85,000, you will be arrested for trespassing." I walked out, the door clicking shut behind me, leaving their screams of outrage and desperation fading into the background of my perfect, quiet kingdom. The heavy oak door of the examination room clicked shut, muffling Alina's sharp, rhythmic shrieks, but the structural integrity of my pristine world had already begun to splinter. I walked down the corridor, the soles of my Italian leather shoes striking the polished marble floors with a sound like metronome ticks. Click, click, click. To the nurses and residents who scurried past me, lowering their heads in practiced deference, I was still the untouchable Dr. Julian Vance. But inside the ribcage of that untouchable doctor, a forgotten, raw nerve was pulsing with a violent, white-hot heat. I locked myself in my private office, ignoring 3 urgent sticky notes Marcus had stuck to my computer monitor. My hands, usually as steady as granite blocks, were trembling slightly. I leaned against the glass wall, looking down at the bustling city streets below. They looked so old. That was the thought that kept clawing its way to the surface of my mind. Arthur Vance had always been an imposing man, not because he was large, but because his indifference was monumental. When I was a child, his silence could freeze a room. Now he was just a frail stack of brittle bones and collapsing cartilage, trembling under the weight of a clock that was rapidly running out. And Alina, who had spent decades reigning over our suburban household with a weaponized, theatrical brand of maternal narcissism, looked like a hollowed-out shell. But the pity was immediately crushed by a wave of cold, crystalline clarity. They hadn't come because they missed me. They hadn't come to look at the man I had become. They had tracked down Dr. Julian Vance, the resource. They hadn't tracked down Julian, their son. The intercom buzzed again. Marcus's voice was tighter this time. "Dr. Vance, I'm sorry, but your sister is on line too. Well, she's being incredibly abusive to the staff, sir. She says if you don't pick up, she's coming down here with a camera crew." I stared at the blinking red light on the console. Chloe, the golden child, the black hole around which our entire family's gravity had revolved for 30 years. I picked up the receiver. "Chloe." "You absolute piece of garbage." Her voice erupted through the speaker, so loud and shrill it distorted the digital audio. "What did you do to Mom and Dad? They just called me from a bus stop, Julian, a bus stop. Dad can barely walk, and Mom is having a panic attack because you had them thrown out by security." "Who do you think you are?" "I am the owner of this clinic," I said, my voice dropping into that dangerously quiet register I used when a resident compromised a sterile field. "And I am a surgeon who charges for his services. If they cannot pay, they cannot be seen. It's a very simple economic principle, Chloe. One I'm sure you're familiar with, considering you took their house to fund your failed boutique." There was a sharp gasp on the other end. "That is none of your business. You've always been a jealous, bitter little freak. You think because you went to medical school you're better than us? You owe them. They raised you. They fed you." "They fed me Chloe's scraps," I corrected her smoothly. "They raised me in the shadow of your mediocre tantrums. And when I reached the absolute pinnacle of my life, they skipped it to feed artisanal cupcakes to a dog. Do not speak to me about debt, Chloe. If we are totaling the ledger, this family owes me a childhood." "Dad is going to be paralyzed, Julian," she screamed, her voice cracking with a mixture of genuine panic and manipulative rage. "Does that mean nothing to you? Where is your heart?" "In my chest, beating perfectly," I said. "Where it will stay. If you love him so much, sell your inventory, remortgage whatever you have left, pay the fee, and I'll operate on him next Tuesday. If not, I suggest you look up the transit schedule for the county hospital's charity ward. Goodbye, Chloe." I slammed the receiver down, the plastic cracking slightly against the base. For the next 48 hours, I tried to submerge myself in the absolute predictable rhythm of the operating theater. I performed a total knee arthroplasty, repaired a shattered glenoid labrum, and cleared a triple-level spinal decompression. In the OR, everything made sense. If there was blood, you cauterized it. If there was a bone spur, you shaved it down. Every action had an equal, predictable, and controllable reaction. But the ghost of Arthur Vance's spine kept appearing on my digital displays. Every time I looked at an MRI of a lumbar vertebrae, I saw the exact layout of his collapsed L4-L5. I knew the precise angle I would need to insert the titanium pedicle screws. I knew the exact microdissection technique required to free his trapped nerve roots without causing permanent neurological deficit. I was, without a doubt, the best surgeon in the tri-state area for his specific condition. The county hospital doctors would likely use outdated techniques, leave him with a massive scar, and a 50% chance of a failed back syndrome. On Thursday evening, as I was signing off on charts in the empty clinic, Marcus walked into my office. He didn't look at me. Instead, he quietly placed a heavy manila envelope on my desk. "What's this, Marcus?" "It was delivered by a courier an hour ago, Dr. Vance, from a legal firm representing your parents." I opened the envelope. Inside was a formal, multi-page document. It wasn't a lawsuit, not yet. It was a formal complaint addressed to the State Medical Licensing Board, accusing me of a gross violation of medical ethics, patient abandonment, and discrimination based on familial status. Attached to it was a personal letter from my mother, written in her loopy, elegant cursive that used to terrify me on report card days. "Julian," the letter read, "if you think you can hide behind your money and your fancy walls while your father rots, you are mistaken. We have spoken to the press. We have spoken to the board. A doctor cannot deny emergency care to someone in dire need, especially not his own flesh and blood. You took an oath to do no harm. By refusing your father, you are actively harming him. We will destroy your reputation, Julian. We will tell the world exactly what kind of monster you are. Or you can do the right thing, call us. Schedule the surgery. Let's put this ugly business behind us." A low, guttural laugh escaped my throat. It was beautiful in a sick, twisted sort of way. They hadn't changed at all. When begging failed, they immediately resorted to extortion. They didn't want a son, they wanted a hostage who could wield a scalpel. I picked up my phone and dialed my personal attorney, Richard. "Julian, it's late. Everything all right?" "Richard, I'm sending you a scanned document. My parents are attempting to blackmail me into performing a free, complex spinal surgery by threatening to go to the medical board and the press." Richard sighed heavily over the line. "Jesus, Julian. Legally, they don't have a leg to stand on regarding patient abandonment. You never established a physician-patient relationship with your father. You did a cursory evaluation in an emergency context, determined he wasn't in acute, life-threatening danger, and referred him to a public facility. The board will throw this out in 10 minutes. "And the press?" I asked, my eyes narrowing. "That's the messy part," Richard admitted. "The media loves a rich, heartless doctor abandons dying parent's story. Even if we sue them for defamation later, the public relations damage to the Vance Regenerative Institute could be catastrophic. High-net-worth clients are fickle, Julian. They don't like scandal. They like discretion." "So what are you advising?" There was a long pause. "From a purely financial and reputational standpoint, it might be cheaper to just do the surgery, put them in a private room, get them to sign a non-disclosure agreement, and kick them out of your life permanently. It's a 2-hour procedure for you. It blocks the scandal before it starts." "No," I said, the word cold and absolute. "If I give them this, Richard, they win. They will have successfully used their own neglect and malice to force my hand. I will not be bullied by the people who abandoned me." "Then prepare for a fight, Julian, because if your mother is as desperate as this letter sounds, she's not going to stop." The storm broke on Friday morning. I arrived at the clinic at 6:30 a.m. to find a local news van parked across the street from the marble entrance. A young, overly eager reporter in a trench coat was standing near the fountain, clutching a microphone. When my silver sedan pulled into the private garage entrance, she didn't catch me, but by 9:00 a.m., the internet had already caught up. Chloe had posted a video. It was a masterclass in digital manipulation. It showed my father, sitting in his frayed jacket in their cramped, dimly lit apartment, wincing in orchestrated agony as he tried to lift a glass of water. Beside him, Alina was weeping openly into a tissue, holding up an old, faded photograph of me as a child. "My son is Dr. Julian Vance," my mother sobbed to the camera. "We sacrificed everything to put him through college. We went hungry so he could have textbooks. And now my husband is facing permanent paralysis, and Julian had us thrown out by armed guards because we couldn't pay his $85,000 fee. He told us to let him rot. He said we weren't worth his time." The video already had 200,000 views. The comments were a cesspool of human bile. "Absolute monster. Strip his license. Hope he rots in hell. This is what's wrong with modern medicine, pure greed." I sat at my desk, watching the view count tick upward like a bomb countdown. My phone was ringing off the hook. Marcus ran into the office without knocking, his face pale as paper. "Dr. Vance, The hospital board at the medical center where you have privileges. They just called. They're launching an internal review regarding the public relations fallout. They want you to take a voluntary leave of absence until this blows over. I looked up at Marcus. For the first time in 10 years, I felt the walls of my perfect, quiet kingdom pressing in on me, suffocating me. The past wasn't dead. It had simply been waiting, biding its time, and now it had crawled out of the grave to drag me down into the mud with it. I pulled open my desk drawer, looking at a small, velvet-lined box. Inside was a pristine, gold fountain pen my grandfather had given me when I got into medical school, the only member of the family who had ever truly cared. I picked up the pen, pulled a piece of official clinic stationery toward me, and began to write. If they wanted a public circus, I was going to give them an act they would never forget. The digital clock on my desk clicked to 11:00 a.m. Outside my glass windows, the local news van had been joined by two others. The internet circus was reaching a crescendo, with Chloe's video now crossing 500,000 views. My office phone line was entirely dead, blocked by a firewall of screening protocols Marcus had frantically set up to deflect the deluge of hate mail and death threats. I stood up, holding the official clinic stationery I had spent the last hour meticulously drafting. I adjusted my silk tie, smoothed down the front of my white lab coat, and walked out to the lobby. "Marcus," I said, my voice cutting through the panic of the front desk staff, "call the reporters outside. Tell them Dr. Julian Vance will be holding a press conference on the steps of the Institute in exactly 15 minutes. And call my sister. Tell her that if she wants her father to walk, she and my parents need to be here to witness it." 15 minutes later, the heavy glass doors of the Vance Regenerative Institute swung open. The midday sun was blinding, reflecting off the lenses of 3 television cameras and the flashing screens of a dozen smartphones held by local reporters. As I stepped onto the marble stairs, a barrage of overlapping, aggressive questions erupted. "Dr. Vance, is it true you refuse to treat your own father? Are you putting profit over human life, doctor? How do you respond to your mother's video?" I raised a single hand. The absolute, unshakable authority I commanded in the operating room spilled over onto the pavement, and the crowd instantly fell into a breathless hush. Standing right at the edge of the media scrum, looking smug and victorious, was Chloe. Flanking her were my parents. My father was positioned prominently in a cheap wheelchair, his head bowed pathetically for the cameras, while my mother held his hand, her face a mask of manufactured tragedy. They thought they had won. They thought the public shame had finally broken my knees. "I have a prepared statement," I announced, my voice carrying clearly through the crisp air. I unfolded the stationery. "For the past 24 hours, a narrative has circulated regarding my medical ethics, my fees, and my relationship with the patients currently standing before you, Arthur and Alina Vance. My mother has publicly stated that they sacrificed everything for my education, and that I have abandoned my father in his hour of dire clinical need due to pure greed." I paused, looking directly at my mother. Her chin came up slightly, a glint of triumph in her eyes. "Medicine is a science of objective truth," I continued, my voice steady and cold. "So, let us look at the objective facts. I have here the certified financial and academic records of my tenure at the State University School of Medicine." I held up a packet of documents. My education was funded entirely by a merit-based full academic scholarship, supplemented by $86,000 in federal student loans, which I paid off myself during my residency. My parents did not contribute a single dollar to my medical training. A murmur ran through the reporters. The cameras zoomed in on the official financial aid seals. Chloe's smile instantly vanished. "Furthermore," I said, flipping to the next page, "regarding the allegation of sudden, cruel abandonment. 10 years ago this month, I graduated at the top of my medical class. I provided my parents with front-row tickets to the ceremony. They did not attend." I pulled out a large, laminated printout of Chloe's infamous Instagram post from a decade ago. I held it high for every camera to capture. Instead, as documented publicly by my sister, they chose to cancel their plans to attend a first birthday party for a dog. For 10 years, I was completely erased from their lives. They did not celebrate my board certifications, my residency, or the opening of this institute. I did not exist to them until they required an $85,000 surgical procedure for free. The reporters began whispering furiously. The cameras panned rapidly from the Instagram printout of the tiara-wearing dog to my mother's face, which was rapidly turning a sickening shade of ash white. "Julian, stop this," my mother shouted, her voice cracking as the crowd turned on her. "This is private. How can you do this to your family?" "You brought the cameras to my door, Elena." "I am simply finishing the interview," I said, my voice cutting through her panic like a scalpel. I turned back to the microphones. "As a physician, I took an oath. That oath dictates that I must never use my medical authority to cause harm. It also dictates that I must act with justice. Therefore, here is my final medical determination regarding Arthur Vance." I looked down at my father, who was staring at his own lap, utterly humiliated. "I will not perform this surgery for free," I declared. A collective gasp echoed through the press pool. "However," I continued, "I will not allow my name or this institute to be used as a scapegoat for this family's historic neglect." Effective immediately, the Vance Regenerative Institute is establishing a fully funded, anonymous charitable endowment at the City-County Hospital. I am personally transferring $170,000 to that fund today, enough to pay for exactly 2 spinal fusion surgeries for patients who cannot afford health insurance. The reporters stared at me, stunned by the sheer, staggering magnitude of the chess move. "The first allocation of that charitable fund," I said, looking directly into my father's terrified eyes, "will be assigned to Arthur Vance. He will receive his surgery at the county hospital, performed by their staff neurosurgeons, completely free of charge, utilizing the standard public wait list, which is currently 14 months long. If his condition is as acutely degenerative as claimed, the county triage board will expedite him accordingly. He will be treated exactly like any other citizen who failed to plan for their medical future." "No," Chloe shrieked, stepping forward, her face contorted in rage. "You can't do that. You're the best surgeon. You're supposed to do it yourself here." "My hands are reserved for patients, Chloe, not for extortionists," I said, looking at her with total, unadulterated indifference. "You wanted charity from the son you abandoned. You received it from the medical system you tried to weaponize. If you believe 14 months is too long to wait, I suggest you sell your assets to pay my private fee. The choice is entirely yours." I folded the papers, tucked them neatly back into the pocket of my white lab coat, and turned my back on the flashing cameras, the shouting reporters, and the weeping of the people who had given me life but denied me a family. As the heavy glass doors of the institute closed behind me, cutting off the chaotic noise of the street, the pristine, beautiful silence of my clinic washed over me once again. Marcus stood in the lobby, staring at me with a profound, newfound reverence. "Cancel my afternoon consultations, Marcus," I said, walking toward the private elevator. "I need to prepare for my 2:00 p.m. total hip replacement." "Right away, Dr. Vance," he murmured. The elevator doors slid open. I stepped inside, pressed the button for the surgical floor, and watched the world disappear behind a wall of brushed steel. The boy in the crimson auditorium was finally, permanently at peace. Dr. Julian Vance had a schedule to keep.